He had been strolling beside the river when the dawn's quiet was broken by a low, uneven groan and a faint rustle. From within the morning mist, a form took shape at the water's edge, partially concealed by low shrubs and reeds. There, sprawled on the damp sand, was a young male lion. His flank was pressed into the earth, his chest rising and falling with the effort of shallow, laboring breaths. The soft murmur of the river beside him seemed to mirror the delicate rhythm of his life. His typically vibrant, golden fur was dark and matted with moisture, clinging to a body that trembled with each difficult inhale. One paw lay twisted at an unnatural angle, its claws half buried in the soft soil. His muzzle quivered, lips pulled back just enough to reveal teeth that appeared less a threat now, and more a sign of vulnerability. The man felt his heart clench. Local warnings echoed in his mind, a stark reminder that approaching a wounded predator was deadly, dangerous. Yet, the sight of the lion, so fragile, so still, stirred a quiet but urgent impulse within him. He lowered himself to the sand, every movement deliberate and measured, careful not to startle the animal. "Easy, boy, easy," he whispered, his voice barely a breath over the river's murmur. The morning air around them was filled with the smells of the river and wet earth, the crispness of dew mingling with the faint scent of decaying leaves. A cool, metallic tang hinted at blood. Nearby, small birds flitted about, hesitant and alert, as if sensing the delicate tension between the lion and the man. The lion's amber eyes opened a sliver, catching the light and flicking toward the man with a look of unease mixed with curiosity. The movement, though small, was deliberate, and the man perceived a subtle shift in the fragile balance between trust and caution. He noted the shallow rise and fall of the chest, the breaths that betrayed exhaustion and pain. He edged closer, his knees pressing gently into the damp ground. At the slightest motion, the lion flinched, his ears flicking and tail twitching with an anxious rhythm. Still, there was no defensive stance, no growl, just the raw vulnerability of a creature far from its strength. The man's hands hovered near, not to touch, but as a patient offer of care, a silent promise. The river whispered along the bank, its water catching a pale gold gleam from the rising sun, while a soft wind rustled through low branches and reeds. Every sound seemed amplified in the quiet space, a delicate symphony of life and lurking danger. His eyes traced the lion's body, noting subtle weight shifts, the faint tremor in his limbs, the shallow quivers that spoke more eloquently than any roar. Another low groan escaped the animal, and the man's heart tightened. He could not look away, could not ignore this quiet distress. The warnings echoed, approaching could mean death. But in that instant, fear was outweighed by something softer, something stronger, the urgent call to help, to bear witness to life in its most fragile, urgent truth. For a long moment, they simply regarded each other, separated by hope, fear, and instinct. The man's voice returned in a gentle murmur. "You're not alone." The words were nearly lost to the river's rush, yet they somehow found the lion. A flicker of recognition passed through those amber eyes, a subtle acknowledgement of presence, patience, and the first fragile thread of trust. The lion groaned again, quieter this time, as if acknowledging the man who had approached with such care. As he drew nearer, the wound became visible, a deep gash across the shoulder. The fur around it was darkened by both dried and fresh blood. The skin was tender and swollen, a raw injury in the dim morning light. Small flies hovered, circling with a subtle menace that seemed almost indifferent to the moment's gravity. Kneeling beside the animal, the man was careful to avoid sudden movements. In silence, he inspected the injury, his eyes tracing the line of torn tissue and bruised muscle. It was clear the lion would not survive long if left alone, and yet each step forward was laced with peril. The locals' warnings surfaced once more, but he set them aside. Now, there was only the patient rhythm of breath and the delicate trust being forged in the space between predator and human. He retrieved a strip of cloth from his pack, dampened it with clean water, and slowly began to dab at the wound. The lion flinched, muscles tensing, but he didn't pull away. Each careful movement was a negotiation, each touch respectful and measured, seeking not to force compliance, but to earn consent. Beside them, the river murmured on, a soft, hypnotic soundtrack to their fragile partnership. The air hung heavy with the scents of earth, blood, and the subtle sweetness of crushed reeds. Sunlight filtered through the trees, touching the lion's tawny fur and highlighting every quiver of muscle, every slight shiver of pain. The man's hands moved steadily, feeling the tremor and warmth beneath the fur, attuned to the lion's responses. The animal was tense, but not defiant, his head lowering slightly as if yielding to the gentleness of care. For a brief moment, the man paused, observing the lion fully, amber eyes half-closed, pupils flicking with caution, ears twitching at distant sounds, tail slowly flicking. He noted the rise and fall of the chest, the faint moans escaping the lion's throat, each one a soft testament to resilience. "Hold still." "Almost there," he whispered. The lion's breath shuddered, a quiet acknowledgement, though no movement beyond the slight lowering of his head suggested comprehension. It was a quiet, fragile bond, built not on words but on timing, patience, and careful observation. A small breeze shifted across the riverbank, carrying the mingled scents of wet earth, reeds, and the metallic tang of blood. Gradually, the lion's muscles loosened, the tension ebbing as he adjusted to the rhythm of the man's care. Each soft exhale, each careful blink of his amber eyes, was a dialogue of trust, a silent communication across species. Hours seemed to pass in the quiet, broken only by soft murmurs and the occasional hiss of the river. With limited supplies, the wound was cleaned as best as possible, and the lion's breathing, though still shallow, began to appear steadier. The man felt the weight of the risk he had taken, but also the unspoken understanding. The fragility of life was matched by the depth of connection possible when fear was met with patience. By late morning, the lion shifted, testing the strength of his legs. The man remained still, ready to support but giving space. The fragile trust they had built was evident in the absence of defensive growls, the subtle lowering of the head, the quiet acknowledgement that he was no longer entirely alone. The river whispered endlessly beside them, the wind rustled the reeds, and the forest seemed to breathe with a careful, measured pause. The man watched, aware that each small step forward could mean the difference between life and death. And in that quiet vigil, he understood that courage wasn't always loud. It could be gentle, patient, and profoundly human. The lion groaned softly, shifting his weight in the sand as his muscles trembled with the effort. His attempt to rise was hesitant, each movement a negotiation between injury and instinct. The man quickly stepped closer, placing a steadying hand beneath the animal's chest. "Easy, easy," he murmured, his voice low and calm, matching the rhythm of the lion's breath. The riverbank was uneven, slick with morning dew and mud, and each step carried risk. The lion's amber eyes flicked toward the water, then back at the man, his pupils wide with exhaustion and weariness. He leaned heavily on the man's support, each motion revealing the fragility of his state. Yet, despite the obvious pain, a spark of resilience shone in those eyes, a desire to stand, to survive. The man guided the lion carefully, his hands gentle but firm. He felt the subtle tension of muscles beneath the fur, the slight tremor of paws sinking into the soft earth, the uneven pulse of a creature testing its strength. Around them, the morning chorus continued, the soft rustle of reeds, the distant calls of birds, and the river's constant whisper. These sounds framed the delicate tension of their shared movement, each note a quiet witness to unfolding courage. Every step was a careful negotiation. The lion paused often, his head dipping and tail flicking with subtle anxiety. The man adjusted his stance, leaning into the animal's weight just enough to prevent collapse, but not so much as to impose. A few droplets of blood fell from the shoulder wound, tracing irregular paths across the sand, a stark reminder of the cost of each movement. Despite the danger, the lion never growled, never lashed out. His eyes remained steady, flicking occasionally toward the man in quiet acknowledgement of the support and presence. The man's voice remained soft, almost hypnotic in its repetition, steady, just steady. It was less a command and more a promise, a tether anchoring them both in the uncertain space between survival and danger. As they moved further from the water's edge, the ground firmed, offering better footing. The lion tested each leg carefully, his muscles straining but gradually strengthening with every step. The man stayed close, subtly adjusting to the animal's movements, matching weight and rhythm in an unspoken dialogue of caution and care. Sunlight now broke through the mist, illuminating the lion's wet fur in streaks of copper and gold. The scent of river and damp earth lingered, mixing with the metallic tang of blood, a constant reminder of the stakes. Each careful motion, each soft exhale, reinforced the fragile trust forming between them. By mid-morning, the lion had taken several unassisted steps, though each was deliberate and tentative. The man took a half step back, letting the animal carry his own weight, offering support only if needed. The rhythm of their movement was slow, cautious, yet charged with quiet triumph. For a moment, the man allowed himself to observe fully, the lion's proud head held slightly higher, the subtle strength returning to his legs, the tentative trust mirrored in his amber eyes. He had been warned, he had risked much. Yet, in that shared journey along the riverbank, the line between hope and danger had shifted. Courage, he realized, was often measured not by grand gestures, but by patient guidance through small, delicate trials. The lion paused mid-step, shifting his massive head as if weighing the distance between comfort and instinct. His amber eyes flicked toward the man, pupils dilated, muscles taut yet relaxed in subtle acknowledgement. Then, with deliberate caution, he lowered his head until it rested gently against the man's side. The gesture was quiet, unexpected, and profoundly moving. The weight was substantial, yet not burdensome, a living testament to the fragile trust they had built. The man remained perfectly still, letting the lion's action define the moment. A soft exhale escaped his lips, and he murmured, almost as a meditation, "You all right?" "It's all right." Gradually, the lion's breathing synchronized with his, shallow but steady, the tremors of pain eased by gentle reassurance and proximity. The river continued its constant whisper beside them, a soft soundtrack to the quiet miracle of connection. Sunlight dappled through the leaves, illuminating droplets of water on the lion's fur, the subtle sheen highlighting every curve of muscle, every sign of strength returning to a body long weakened. Each quiet adjustment, each small shift carried meaning, trust not forced, but freely given. Fragile, yet unshakable in that moment. The forest around them seemed to pause. A bird called softly from the canopy. Leaves rustled with a warm breeze, and the faint scent of damp earth mingled with the metallic tang of dried blood. The man's hands rested lightly against the lion, feeling the pulse of life, the steady rhythm of breath, the subtle relaxation of muscles. For an instant, the boundary between species dissolved, leaving only mutual care and recognition. The lion's tail flicked slowly, brushing the ground, then curled slightly around the man's leg, a gesture both tentative and protective. There were no defensive movements, no growls, just quiet acceptance. The man's heart swelled with understanding. It was not subjugation, not obedience. It was a wordless acknowledgement of patience, respect, and courage. Minutes passed without interruption, measured in the gentle sway of the river and the slow exhale of the forest. The man's gaze met the lion's, and in that brief connection, he recognized a silent communication older than words, rooted in empathy and instinct. The injured lion had chosen to lean into him, to share the fragile space between human and predator, and that choice carried a weight heavier than any roar. A soft breeze stirred, carrying the earthy aroma of wet soil, reeds, and distant wildflowers. The lion shifted, adjusting his head, but never removed it, as if claiming a quiet sanctuary in the man's presence. The man remained still, feeling the remarkable gift and responsibility of this trust. After several minutes, the lion finally lifted his head, stretching slightly as muscles rippled with the return of cautious strength. Yet the connection lingered in the way his eyes met the man's one last time, a silent promise of recognition, of shared struggle, and of understanding. The river murmured beside them. The sunlight warmed the damp earth, and the forest exhaled softly, carrying the quiet miracle of this improbable bond. In that moment, the man understood fully that compassion and courage could coexist in silence, in patience, in the steady rhythm of hands, breath, and trust. The lion had offered him something profound, something rare, the quiet gesture of belief that, despite injury and danger, connection could transcend fear. By late afternoon, the lion had regained enough strength to move independently, though each step remained deliberate and measured. The shoulder wound, still tender, no longer impeded the rhythm of his stride. The man observed from a short distance, his hands resting lightly on his pack, his body calm yet tense, attuned to every subtle shift of weight, every flick of tail, every flicker of amber eyes. The river shimmered beside them in the slanting light, the current whispering against rocks and reeds. Birds called in the distance, and the sense of sun-warmed foliage and damp earth mingled with the lingering metallic tang of the lion's injury. It was a quiet, vibrant world, alive with gentle danger and possibility alike. The lion paused once, his head turning toward the man. There was no plea, no hesitation, no roar, only a soft, steady gaze that spoke of acknowledgement, of recognition, of trust given and earned. For a long moment, the two simply regarded one another. Two lives connected in the fragile space between empathy and instinct. Then, with deliberate grace, the lion stepped forward. Each paw sank slightly into the soft soil, muscles flexing as his body rose with newfound strength. The man took a careful step back, giving space, watching as the creature he had aided reclaimed its own rhythm. The sun broke through the trees in golden streaks, illuminating leaves, fur, and river in a warm, gentle glow. "Go, you're free now," the man whispered, almost to himself. The lion's ears flicked at the sound. He lifted his head and moved with quiet confidence. Step by careful step, he walked into the forest beyond the riverbank. Each motion was fluid, a testament to resilience and the quiet miracle of recovery. The man stayed where he was, breathing in the warmth of the late afternoon sun, feeling the pulse of life still vibrating in his chest. The forest carried on around him, the rustle of leaves, the distant hum of insects, the soft chorus of a world untouched by human urgency. And yet, in that stillness, the memory of amber eyes, steady breath, and gentle trust remained luminous and indelible. The lion disappeared into the dappled light of the forest, tall grass parting gently as he moved, his gait steady and purposeful. The man watched until he was just a silhouette against the golden horizon, a living reminder of patience, courage, and the quiet power of connection. As he turned to walk back along the riverbank, the man carried the moment with him silently, a soft, glowing imprint on his memory. It was not a story of grand heroics, nor a triumph of conquest. It was a story of trust, of patience, and of the extraordinary gentleness that could exist between wild and human, when compassion met courage in quiet, deliberate measure. The river continued to murmur. The forest breathed softly, and the man moved forward, step by careful step, knowing he had witnessed something rare. A life saved, a bond formed, and a quiet moment that would remain alive and luminous forever.